Alright, so my name is Daniel Thorne. This is a course in what I am broadly referring to as Neuroeconomics, which is a blanket term for the means by which I intend to describe the essential nature and mechanics of the human brain, and upon so doing to shed some light on what might be taking place within the human mind. This will be an attempt over a series of lectures in which I will present some thinking on these matters and try to account for them in a way that I find, if not totally satisfying, then at least particularly interesting, and in some cases scientifically promising. I'm going to try to be both as general and as specific as I need to in order to be clear and to the point, and I'm going to start with some core precepts of a new theory and spend another several videos exploring some of its applications. The subtitle of this course is An Applied Information Theory, which I hope doesn't sound too daunting to anyone unfamiliar with computation or formal logic, and it will be heavily rooted in biology, which again I hope doesn't put people off who don't have that specific background. I think in general a bachelor's level scientific literacy and a little basic philosophical training are helpful to anyone who wants to follow along. But I've tried to design this series in a way that makes it accessible without anything specifically like a prerequisite. I think most people will be able to see what I'm getting at as I go along, and as I get to things that may be a little beyond the level of common knowledge, I'll try to speak in a way that makes what I'm talking about easy to look up and research if it's something I don't directly explain. Additionally, I will try to be as outward and as transparent in my thinking as possible. I will try to show my work as much as I can as I go, and I will be open to clarifying if there's anything I've left uncertain. And overall, I will seek to establish the propositions and arguments I put forward using what overall I submit is entirely philosophically, intellectually, and scientifically uncontroversial. I will make every effort to connect the things I say to tangible, intelligible examples to which many people should be able to relate. And whether I am ultimately right or wrong about what I have to say, I will try to make what I have to say as easy to understand as possible and show the ways I might be wrong in a helpful and enlightening way. I should say at the outset that what probably won't be very helpful to you as this course progresses, at least not necessarily, is too prominent a background in psychology, at least if you really put a lot of stock in those approaches and take their precepts too seriously and think they more or less have it all figured out. I think the other approaches to psychology that are available to us at the time of this recording are inadequate at best. And I have a lot to say on the matter, but for the sake of clarity, I will begin from something of an intellectual blank slate as I attempt to establish something new. So, to put it another way, this course intends to start from scratch to the extent that science allows and build something that can be worthwhile in replacing a lot of what is, put simply, a feeble waste of time. I do intend to revisit some of the more popular and widely held psychological notions and ideas within this series, the sort of garden variety psychological ideas and things that many people think or are used to being told about how the brain and mind work, but for now I'll focus elsewhere. And I think the first thing that must be done in this introduction is to dispel the notion, the very popular and misguided notion, that psychology as a whole, as a body of study or as a way of understanding the human being and how it works, does have it all or really anything figured out. I think the way most people are used to thinking of psychology is with an implicit deference to its precepts and conclusions as discoveries and conclusions of science, with the same weight of knowledge and history of study that something like biology or chemistry or physics has. And not only is that patently incorrect, it is also dangerously complacent, and it misunderstands two facts about psychology. That psychology belongs to the soft sciences, meaning both that it establishes what it establishes on somewhat tenuous ground relative to the way other sciences do it, and that what it has managed to establish requires a great deal of outside explanation or pondering, meaning that it can effectively be computed or modeled in a way that doesn't require these caveats and explanations. and also meaning that nothing is as clearly established through peer review as the other sciences, and that the psychology you get when you talk to one psychologist and the psychology you get when you talk to another, the fundamental tenets and precepts to which they subscribe, the means by which they analyze and interpret, the things they're willing to embrace or discount, and so on, vary wildly. And the simple fact is that at the moment there is no broad scientific consensus that establishes a coherent and unified approach to understanding the human being and its essential functions. And even when you get to the people within psychology who believe there is something to the idea that the mind and its functions arise from the workings of our brains, how that takes place and what governs that process, along with the vast majority of both finer details and broader strokes of theory, is widely admitted to be something of a mystery. So not only is psychology a fuzzy science, which is at times astonishingly vague and voodoo-ish, as well as astonishingly beholden to biases and culturally informed pre-interpretation, there isn't even enough comprehensive and definitive science to get psychologists to agree on what it is they are led to by evidence and argument to believe as psychologists. And the purpose of this course is to confront both of these problems. I think there is a broad consensus among scientists of the brain and of human biology, along with the branch of psychologists who think seriously about these things, that the answers we are looking to find about who we are, what we're made of, and how we work are going to come from studying the brain, and this is something with which I agree. And I think most people at the cutting edge of the field would say that our ability over the last 40-odd years, the growth in our ability to research, image, and gather data and observations about the brain in amazingly fine detail, has provided an extraordinary amount to work with that we have yet to fully make sense of. And I think it would be fair to say that our research and what we have in terms of real science to work with have outrun our attempts at joining that research together in theory. And I think, too, we have a sense that all this research and all the products of these technologies are putting us tantalizingly close to something resembling an answer to these challenges and questions. And the goal of this series is to help construct a bridge between those two worlds. The world of massive amounts of fascinating research that is concrete and comprehensible but unable to be understood effectively, and the world of accessible, easy to understand perspectives that frame the questions of our lives and ourselves in a way that makes sense to us personally and subjectively. And what we're setting out to describe is, in a nutshell, a sophisticated analytical view of the processing of human nervous systems. We are setting ourselves the task of determining a logical, rational, objective, and unified understanding of their means of operation, and of defining the rules and laws by which they operate both specifically and in general. It is also our goal to relate these things to tangible, subjective experience, and to describe the means by which one is translated visibly into the other. And our project is an ambitious one. As we will see in a future video when we start accounting for what we know about the human brain and about human biological function, the brain itself is an extraordinarily complex organ, and in fact it's one that I will attempt to show is even more complex than we currently appreciate. But even without diving down the rabbit hole of neurons and of brain function, we can tell qualitatively and upon very limited observation that we live lives of extraordinary complexity which take place in extraordinarily complex worlds. And what we're trying to do here is make sense of things on both sides of that distinction. What is to be made of how the brain works in specific connection to how it feels and seems to someone who exists as a property of that brain's activities. So in short, we're trying to use what knowledge we have about what the brain is and how it works to establish a broad-based, wide-reaching, comprehensive methodology for understanding and for investigating what the human being is and how it works, which is grounded in the following axiom. The mind is what the brain does. So as we move forward, we are exploring the question of what we can interpret about what it is to be human and to live as a human being by utilizing what we know to be true about the physiological components of the system that supports that existence and experience. And in the course of this endeavor, we are asking, what observations do we have about the brain and its functions? What information do we have about the state of being and experience those functions facilitate? From these, what can we infer about the nature and purpose of those functions? How can we prove those inferences? Can these be brought together to establish a comprehensive approach? If so, what are the substantive and material components of that approach? Can these components determine the fundamental principles of the system? If so, how can these be applied? And we can say that the entirety of what we will submit going forward relies on the following assumptions. One, that all aspects of the thing we are seeking to evaluate are subject to observation, experiment, and investigation, meaning that we take as read the proposition that epistemologically speaking, these are things that are observable and can be borne out by experimentation and investigation. This is just a nod to the tacit acceptance of the validity of the scientific approach. Two, that those same attributes are grounded in material reality, meaning that what there is to be investigated is present for us to observe within the right experimental parameters, and that they are there to be seen when looked for. And this is more generally to say that this construction does not invoke anything immaterial or anything essentially unobservable in order to explain itself. Three, that these things in total are inherently natural processes, and that they are subject to all scientific understanding and scrutiny, meaning that the conclusions we draw going forward must be borne out not only by their own evidence, but by their concurrence with and justification from other branches of scientific knowledge. And that, in spite of its mysterious and confounding appearance, and regardless of the information we may or may not lack on the subject itself is essentially non-mysterious, meaning that solutions to the problems we pose do objectively exist. The philosopher Daniel Dennett has popularized a distinction between puzzles and mysteries, and we will be addressing the human condition as a puzzle. Therefore, we will begin by addressing the human being and its functions entirely and completely, front to back and back again, as a natural phenomenon. So to describe our approach, we'll restate this in the form of the following. Human beings are physical entities, meaning that we are bodies as opposed to merely having bodies, and that we exist within bodies through which everything we experience, feel, do, and so on is processed. And every component of the human experience is grounded in a physical reality, meaning that it has some physical representation, and that if we're looking to investigate that experience, then that physical representation is where we should look. To this we add that physical reality promotes objective conditions, which have an identifiable effect on the activity within the system, meaning that we can reasonably and reliably say that components of the system and variations within the system function objectively and according to rules and natural laws. And that those effects promote feedback in that system, which is governed and defined by its own relationship to the same system of natural law, which is simply to say that not only is the system constructed of natural components and influenced by nature, but its function and behavior is likewise essentially natural. And we submit that these conditions and responses are essentially symbiotic and must be understood in confluence, meaning that the human being and its processing are inseparable from the means by which this processing is accomplished, and in a broader sense inseparable from a context that provides both information to process and that stimulates and coordinates that processing. So as we move forward from this position and conduct our exploration according to these principles, we're going to try and do this as a matter of pure theory. There are a number of reasons, practical reasons, ethical reasons, financial reasons, why I personally am not in a position at this time to be conducting scientific experimentation into the things I will put forward in this course, but I will try and establish them to the extent that I am able through thought experiments and analyses, along with basic logic and reasoning to establish them philosophically and intellectually. In other words, I'm trying to provide proofs rather than evidence of these things because that is what I can do at the moment with the tools I have. And those tools also include the scientific and scientifically established work of others, which, again, I will draw from things that are well established or at least are not largely or particularly in dispute. So I'm not interested in submitting a great deal of new facts or knowledge. I am merely trying to take that which is established as fact and knowledge and provide a new means for analyzing and interpreting it, and in some cases I may provide hunches or some new constructions that I believe should be borne out by testing and experimentation. So the objective here is to craft a theory of axiomatic precepts and conclusions with inbuilt hypotheses that raises worthwhile questions, including those regarding its own validity, the answers to which will provide the means to achieve a thorough and robust understanding of the human being and its functions. And if I can be successful in doing this, it will pursue the following goals. 1, to advance progress in the understanding of and response to human conditions. 2, to enhance the relationship between psychology and human biology. 3, to provide foundational precepts that can inform the course of scientific inquiry. And 4, to elucidate new avenues of inquiry that at present are difficult to discern. So ultimately what this course is about is using the tools available to someone who is not an academic or scientific insider to build a new set of tools for academics and scientists to use that will enable the unification of philosophy of mind and the science of brain, that combined with a new method for bringing the information from those and other fields together will promote a massive wholesale shift in paradigm that moves us forward on the path to answering human questions about human lives and circumstances. What I hope is that if I am found to be correct in what I put forward, the work begun by these videos will fundamentally change the way we look at everything from the tiniest, most imperceptible facets of neurological activity to the broadest strokes of what takes place inside a person's mind, to the effect that that has on the person's participation in the world outside their bodies and the way the entire system feeds back on itself. With this in mind, the applications of a theory such as I describe are nothing short of universal to all human beings and their ability to understand and make sense of themselves and the way they operate. I hope these precepts will inform the growth of academic and research investigations into these matters, and that over time it will be integrated with other branches of knowledge and understanding to assist in enabling an even more thorough comprehension of natural reality. Without the influence of ego or personal attachment, I feel confident in describing the shift I am describing, concurrent with the establishment of such a theory, as equivalent to the discovery of germ theory, and predict that its influence on medical, therapeutic, and psychiatric approaches to mental health, as well as mental illness and difficulties of all kinds, will be profound, although at this time it is premature to forecast them. And the knock-on effect that this would have on all manner of human endeavors could also be immense. And I don't want to overstate this here, but I also don't want to understate it. What I am setting out to achieve here, and what time will tell as to whether or not I got it or anything about it right, is the means to fundamentally change what the world can think and does think about these matters, and to provide it with the opportunity to take that somewhere completely and entirely new. And the simple fact is that regardless of whether it's my theory or somebody else's, whether I'm right or wrong or have missed the mark entirely, that change's day is due. We are in an unprecedented time of difficulty and strife and complications from living as we do in the modern world today. Millions and millions suffer, and often suffer to death, under the weight of our collective inability to address the problems we are faced with effectively, and we are beyond the point where we can stand morally or ethically to be ignorant any longer. There is a big grain of salt with which most of what I will say here has to be taken, which is that, as I have admitted, the ideas that I will put forward are untested, unchallenged, and unverified, but in whatever course they find as their validity is confirmed or demolished, what must change is the extent to which we are stupefied and confounded by the problems we face. And I think even if we want to, no matter how desperately, we are hobbled and made ineffectual by our want for knowledge and understanding of the truth. And if all I can do is demonstrate what can and must be known in order to achieve progress, then that will be something. As I said, there are no specific prerequisites for this course, and I will try to credit, reference, and explain as I go. But if you'd like to take it upon yourself, there are a number of books I would suggest to inform your frame of reference. It will be very important that you understand human evolution, so you'll need Origin of Species, obviously, and I would also highly suggest that you read The Selfish Gene for a number of reasons. Greatest Show on Earth is good for an approach to evolution through comparative biology. And if you want to go further in that direction, you can also read Thomas Henry Huxley's Evidence as to Man's Place in Nature. For some basics in information theory and physical systems, you'll want to read two books by James Gleick, The Information and Chaos, both of which are very highly recommended. Both of these books fundamentally shaped my thinking. For books on the brain, I would recommend these. They are each important in their own way, and if you continue on with books from Sapolsky, Ramachandran, Pinker, or Sachs, there will be a lot that's worthwhile. Sapolsky also has a very, very good human biology course available through Stanford University's YouTube channel, and if you have 25 or 30 hours you want to spend watching lectures, your time there would be well spent. And there is a very interesting book that I would add to this list, which on the surface may seem like the least applicable or intuitive, but it's actually The Chemical History of a Candle, which is a transcript of 6 lectures in a series given by Michael Faraday about the composition and combustion of a candle. 6 lectures. And in the course of it, one of the things he says is that there isn't a single physical or chemical process known to the science of his time that is not at play during the course of that combustion. And in exquisite and painstaking detail, he spends 6 lectures going through all of them. And this is on the list mainly because that is the extent of perspective and ability to shift focus that's going to be required in order to appreciate everything we will examine going forward. I think if you can read that book and feel that you understand it and be fascinated by it for 6 whole lectures about something it would take you about 2 seconds to look at, that's the kind of marathon attention span and ability to sit with subtlety, complexity, and nuance within the incredibly mundane that will serve you well over the next many videos. Unfortunately, there is not a textbook specifically for this course yet, so it helps if you are the sort of person who learns well through lectures. The first book containing my thesis is and will remain out of print, and its replacement is some distance from being finished, yet alone published, so its release date is a perpetual TBD at the moment. In lieu of that, however, I will try to make these videos comprehensive enough to stand on their own, and I will make some notes and outlines available, providing details on where to find some of the information I will reference. And if there's anything that's confusing or that I leave unsaid, or if there's something you'd like to raise for me to address, I will try to respond to comments and questions. And it may be, too, that I end up revisiting some material in future videos or doing videos that look at the same material in different ways and from different perspectives. So thank you for your interest and your time, and I hope you'll continue on to the next video.